Good morning, everyone. Welcome to you all who are streaming with us. We enfold you in the consciousness right here in this room. We're encircled. Right in the midst of us is the one power, the one presence that activates all life in the universe. And we affirm that power and presence is right here, right now, in this room, and with each one of you streaming this with us. Wherever we are, God is, and there is no separation. We pray in the name and the nature of the indwelling Christ presence. And so it is, and so we allow it to be. Amen.
Amen.
I guess it's been a month and a half ago when Debbie and I talked after I did the last series, and she booked me for this one, and we were talking about topics. And at the time, I was just fresh from experiencing a talk that was delivered at our church by Shad Groverland. Shad Groverland is the new executive director at Unity Worldwide Ministries. He was raised in Unity and then went into the corporate world and music production and stuff for many, many years. And then he came back to Unity. He's a Unity minister, and now he's the executive director there. I highly encourage y'all to go check out. You can go to Unity Church of the Hills' YouTube page, type in his name, Shad, it's S-H-A-D, Groverland, Unity Church of the Hills, and his talk will come up. His talk was about 45 minutes long. I don't intend to talk to you for 45 minutes. You're going to get the Cliff Notes version of the talk. But to set it up a little bit, he was talking about sort of unity, past, present, and future. Like, where are we going? As in unity. And ultimately, kind of gets down to that question of why am I here? Not like, why am I here? What am I? What's the path? And I think a lot of times we kind of take things for granted. We kind of come, we get into our practices, we get into our routines and everything. And then every once in a while, somebody comes in and offers a fresh perspective on something that we've, kind of known for a while, but we just kind of get on rote autopilot and everywhere. And it's like all of a sudden, wow, that's a fresh look at it. And his talk that he delivered, the one I'm encouraging you all to go check out, because it's really, really wonderful talk, even though it is 45 minutes long. It's really very engaging talk. But he had been delivering a talk, and one of his the premise in his talk was that basically, God is everywhere present. That's something that we affirm, right? There's no space between us and God. And so it implies sort of that everyone has equal access to God. Everyone has equal access to that divine power of love. Everyone has equal access to bliss and peace. And after this talk that he had given, this woman came up to him after the talk. He describes her as a sister of color, and she challenges him by saying, that's not quite right, because everyone doesn't have equal access to God. And so she was sort of coming at it from this sort of social justice and political point of view. And Chad's a very open guy. So he's like, well, okay, I needed a challenge. That was kind of a challenge. I hadn't really, thought about it in those terms. So he had to take it into some consideration. And so it ultimately leads into, making a long story short, it leads him into a particular meditation where he's bringing this into consciousness, trying to work this out, this challenge that's been presented to him. The way he described it was, hey, I got blind spots. We all kind of have blind spots and everything. And so when someone comes up and challenges you on something that you have a preconceived notion about what you think it is, and it's like, oh, well, then it becomes incumbent upon you to say, well, I got to test this. Maybe I do have a blind spot, here. And so he went into this meditation to sort of, ask for clarification, ask for clarity on this issue. And he meditating outside. And has anybody ever meditated outside? Right? Has nature challenged you in that regard? He starts talking about, there was this, what he described as a pesky fly who was like intent on getting inside of his body through his nose, his ear, his mouth, like whatever, but it was challenging him to get into this, sort of meditative God space and everything. And he recognized that in that moment, that fly was more powerful than God, because that fly was, blocking his access to have this God experience in the meditation. So he started thinking about some of the other social and cultural kinds of things that are, set up around the world, block to the awareness of the presence of God, right? A Course in Miracles says, basically that love is everywhere present, right? If I'm not seeing love, it's not evidence that love is not present. It's evidence that I'm not seeing correctly. There's a block in my way. And so the purpose of the Course in Miracles is to remove the obstacles to the awareness of love's presence. And in that moment for Chad, the fly represented that potential block. That was, he had to, sort of work his way through that to get to that place of awareness to where, hey, even the fly is part of this oneness. Mm-hmm. There are distractions, and this fly embodied all of those distractions. And so ultimately he gets into the meditation successfully. He goes past that and everything. And in the meditation, he began thinking about the unity principles and so forth, and what we believe and what we're practicing here. And I don't know if y'all are aware of this or not. You may be aware of this or not, but Charles Fillmore, Myrtle Fillmore, they did not articulate the 5 principles. They weren't around even for the first 100 years. That the 5 principles that we know, that we practice, that we pretty much affirm every week at unity churches around the world, they didn't really come into being, so to speak, as an articulated set of principles until around the centennial celebration of unity in the 80s. And it was Charles's granddaughter who was asked during this period when they're doing all this publicity for the centennial celebration. Someone asked us, well, what does unity believe? What are the principles? And so they realized, well, there's no codified, set of principles. So that's when it was the response to this question that drove them to actually articulate what we believe. And I remember when I first came to unity in the late 90s, early 2000s was when I really kind of got busy at it in the early 2000s. It seemed like it took me forever to get the principles ingrained. They're very simple, but it seemed like every church I went to, every time I happened to see the principles articulated, it was a completely different articulation. So every time I was looking at it, it was like a dog looking at a card trick. I was just like, what? This isn't what I remembered. So I would have to, maybe I'm wrong. So I would, review this articulation of the principles. And I began to realize, there's an articulation for the kids, there's an articulation for this church, but then if you go to another church, they've got a different set of principles on the board. And then if you look at Ellen Davenport's book on the 5 principles, that's a different articulation than what you may be used to. So it's not so much about the specific iteration of what the principles are, but more the underlying spirit. So I realized after about 5 or 6 years in unity that I couldn't give the elevator pitch, so to speak, to like, somebody's you got 2 minutes with them, what does unity stand for? So I had to begin to formulate that. And I didn't really start formulating that until I started my coursework when around 2008 was when I started the SEE path that ultimately led to the L.U.T path. And I began to work on getting these principles into where I could talk about them, right? We like top 10 lists and all kinds of things. We're always kind of ranking things, right? And so when you look at the 5 principles and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, there's a tendency, just sort of a subconscious tendency for us to think that they're ranked in importance, right? The first principle, there's one power, one presence active in the universe, in our lives, God the good. Some people, some congregations go a little bit further and they try to attribute God the good, the omnipotent. Okay. Others extend it to include, omniscient and omnipresent. I even go further than that by saying, if I'm saying that God is omnipotent, then first of all, I'm personifying God as being all powerful. I've gone past the omnipotent thing where I just describe it as omnipotence. God is not all powerful. God is all power. Oh. Okay. God is not omnipresent. God is omnipresence itself. Mm-hmm. God is not omniscient, all knowing. God is all knowledge. God is omniscience, right? So we get past that personification, which for some people is a stumbling block, to get into a relationship with God. So as we know him, there's one power, one presence active in the universe, in our lives, God the good. We are created in the image and likeness of God. Therefore, we are inherently divine as well. We are co-creating this in unity principle number 3. We are co-creating this experience by the thoughts and the feelings that we are allowing to dominate in our consciousness. And that number 4 is, we practice affirmative prayer and meditation to increase our awareness of that connection with God. And then the fifth principle is the action principle, right? It's, all of these truths don't really mean anything, don't have any power and efficacy in our lives unless we're willing to live the truth that we know. So that's the traditional way we go through it. What Shad was doing when he was having that meditation, trying to find his way into here, he heard a voice say, flip the script. Mm-hmm. Well, flip the script. What does that mean? Oh, turn it upside down. And so basically his presentation, he starts with unity principle number 5. Like I said, we tend to think of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 as if they're sort of ranked. They're all of equal importance, right? They're not one is better than the other. But if one is better than the other, taking action is way more important than the others, because if we don't take action, then we're just sitting around talking. We're just sitting around parsing, out metaphysical speculation and everything. Oh, that's an interesting idea. One God, one power, one presence. Well, what about the devil? What about evil? What about, what seems to be opposite, right? But we have to, in unity, we affirm there's only that one power, one presence. But it begins, as Shad laid out there, with that fifth principle, that action that we take in our lives is really the most important. And that if we're not committed to taking action on the truths that we're learning, then it's going to have no effect and consequence in our lives. And so he starts going through the principles in reverse, right? Starts at number 5 with that commitment. Are you truly committed to having these teachings transform your life? If you're not truly committed to having them transform your life, to improve the quality of your life, then what are you doing here? Mm-hmm. That was ultimately the question. What are we doing here? Why am I here? And trying to give people a clear sense of the path. Like if you come to unity and you're new coming to unity and everything, well, what does unity believe? Or is unity a Christian church? Is, they start asking all the traditional kinds of questions, trying to fit it into their existing worldview when they show up. But the bottom line, I heard this a long time ago. This is probably in the early years when I started doing my SCE work and everything. We were having a conversation about it one time, and it's like, unity requires a high degree of commitment. If you're going to get the benefits of living the unity principles, that it requires, it's not in some sort of traditional sort of Protestant or mainstream churches. It's like, just profess that Jesus Christ is your Lord and Savior, and all will be well. Like it happens sort of automatically, kind of thing, just by professing. It's like, no, it doesn't happen automatically. We have to engage. We are constantly choosing. And of course, in Miracles language, we're choosing between love and fear, right? Love and fear, thousands of times a day. Yeah. Thousands of times a day. And how if you've chosen fear versus love is, how's your peace doing? Because as soon as you choose fear, your peace is the first casualty. Mm-hmm. So if you're not at peace as the Course in Miracles says, if you're not at peace for any reason, you've chosen wrongly. And the antidote is to choose again. Okay, choose again. Choose what? Choose love. So we're oscillating back and forth between that all day, every day of our lives. As I said, hundreds, thousands of times a day. You want to see how you're doing on your spiritual path? Sit down with a cup of hot tea and turn on the news. And we'll see how well you're practicing. Okay. But you got to have that commitment, that high degree of commitment to live these principles in order for them to actually improve your life. Mm-hmm. And your life is in sort of an external kind of valuation that we're doing. Okay, well, I have more money in the bank. I have a better relationship, all these external kinds of qualifiers. But more of the work actually takes place on an internal basis. So let's go backwards on these things. Let's say unity's fifth principle, these truths that we say we believe, have no power unless I'm willing to take action on them. I'm willing to live them in my life. Okay. And so now we go to the fourth principle, right? That affirmative prayer, meditation, that I'm committed. I've made my commitment now. And the first step is to make that commitment to spend time in affirmative prayer, to spend time in meditation, to spend time in spiritual contemplation. For what? Oh, to increase my awareness of the indwelling presence, to increase my awareness of my connection to this indwelling presence. That God is not out there in a certain sense, although God is out there, but God is out there and within as well, immanent within and transcendent everywhere else. God is the space between you and I. Mm-hmm. God is you. God is you. God is me. God is all of us and the space that seems to be in between us. And so we're going to connect in oneness, then we have to have a totality, a total view, an all-encompassing view of everything. And that in effect, going back to that original challenge that Shad had, does everybody actually have equal access to bliss? Does everyone have equal access to God, despite appearance of circumstances? And like in his case, that pesky fly that was attempting to get in between him and his awareness of God, that ultimately he had to unfold even that challenge into that the fly was God, basically. It wasn't an interruption. You have to ultimately get your consciousness wrapped around that. So we practice that fourth principle in affirmative prayer and meditation, everything, to increase our awareness of that connection. So I got to practice that first. I got to remain mindful. Oh yeah, I have this connection. This connection is with me everywhere I am. There's nowhere I can be that God is not. God is everywhere present. No matter where I travel, no matter what circumstances and challenges I may be going through, God is present in those too. And we practice that, but I won't practice that fourth principle and that affirmative prayer and meditation, everything to increase my awareness, if I don't already have a pre-existing commitment to practice it. If I'm not firm in my resolve about, I'm going to work on these principles, I'm going to integrate them into my life, and I'm going to live this way. If I don't have that commitment first, it's gonna be, what do they say? Weeping and gnashing of teeth. It's kind of thing. We'll be frustrated in our efforts, right? Because we don't have that underlying commitment. Unity, to practice unity and to have it have efficacy in our lives, requires a high degree of personal responsibility. I have to be willing to take personal responsibility for my circumstances. I have to be willing to take responsibility for how I respond to challenges in my life. I have to take responsibility for how I perceive other people, external circumstances in the world, challenges to my personal peace. I'm responsible for my personal peace, no matter what's going on out here. Mm-hmm. And trust me, and you know this from your own experience, there's always something out there competing for your peace. Always. That's, there will always be wars and rumors of wars. We tend to think of those in terms of military conflict, but a war is anything that's competing for your peace. At a metaphysical level, it could be anything, including the pesky fly in Chad's chase, right? That's competing for your awareness of that connection. So we practice that affirmative prayer. We practice that meditation. We practice that time in the silence, and it requires that underlying commitment. So now we move up to unity principle number 3. We are co-creating this experience by the thoughts and the feelings that we are allowing to dominate in our consciousness. This activity of our thinking nature that's going on, that's not being downloaded from the world and that we have no power over it. We are choosing what paths we go on. I've got a really, really dear friend right now who has a strong, I would say religious foundation, more so than a spiritual foundation, because he comes from a more traditional Protestant orientation, and he holds to that. Like any attempt to get him to have a metaphysical discussion, he kind of resists and everything because he's in that literal mode. Well, he's been going through some challenging times and he's kind of in the ditch right now. And I'm trying to help him, give some buoyancy and everything. Mm-hmm. But in the activity of his thinking, he's ingrained so much in those trenches that he's in, and they're not working. They're not working, or he's not working them. Okay. And so he's challenged because now he's kind of at that crossroads, right? And he's lost that underlying commitment. Like, if you really believe what you say, and that's had power in your life, then you begin to live by those. Now you're abdicating them because things aren't going the way you want them to go, and he's in a hurry to get validation from the external world. It's like, until you learn to inner validate yourself, you wouldn't even recognize validation from the external world. You'd swat it away because you wouldn't feel worthy of it. So it's that activity of his thinking. I'm trying to get him to be aware of the ruts that he's got himself into. I talked to him a few weeks ago, And I was giving him my best, y'all. For like 2 hours, we're having a bite to eat and we're watching some sports and everything. And I'm talking to him, I'm giving my best, trying to get a response, any response from him. And he'd look at me, he'd listen to me, and he wouldn't object, he wouldn't argue, he would do nothing. Mm-hmm. He was just flatlined. And it took 2 hours until finally I said something that just tickled him in his soul so much that he just laughed for like 5 minutes. Every time he would think about what I said, he would just start laughing till he was like crying. And that was the first response I'd gotten from him in like 2 hours of talking to him. It's like I'm grabbing at everything, kind of what can I do? Just all I wanted to do was just to get a response from him, because he's just looking at me, just flatlined. Mm-hmm. And so I was pointing out to him, like, you're a sort of a victim, as it were, and I use that term loosely, but you're a victim to the momentum of your thinking. You're a victim to that, and you can't presently find a way out of that rut you've got yourself into. But you're going to have to, otherwise you're going to keep getting the same results that you're getting. So once again, we're co-creating this experience by the thoughts and the feelings that we are allowing. That's a statement of truth, right? That's just a statement of principle. But if I don't have that commitment down here at Unity Principle number 5 to live these truths that I say that I know, then I don't have any leverage to change the outcome or change the activity of my thinking first. I've got to change the activity of my thinking and how I feel about that before I'm going to get different results in the world. So now we're sort of graduating. We accept that. Okay, we're increasing our awareness to God and affirmative prayer and meditation, that spiritual practice. I'm responsible for the activity of my thinking and feeling nature. I'm co-creating this experience. It's not happening to me, it's happening for me, right? I'm not a victim of these circumstances. Every one of these circumstances that I'm challenged by is actually calling me forward into my transformation. So now we graduate. Now we're at Unity Principle number 2. We are all created in the image and likeness of God. Everyone, all people, have an innate, inherent divinity within them. All people. All people. Are you practicing that in your life? No. Yeah, it's a challenge. It's a challenge but anytime we get off anytime we kind of fall off the diving board there, and we find that we're trying to exclude some people from our vision of oneness and unity, it's a formula that can't work, because we have to be committed to say all people are children of God. All people are inherently divine, even the ones we disagree with, even the ones that challenge us, even the ones we might want to throw off the ship, whatever the case may be. You can do that. You can attempt to do it, but you can't do that and experience peace. They're mutually exclusive terms. You're only going to experience peace when you can wrap your heart, wrap your mind, wrap your soul around all people are part of this experience. And my work is to, regardless of what's going on in the world, what's going on in the world is not an excuse for me to abdicate my personal responsibility. In fact, that's invitations calling me forward to a greater spiritual transformation, to continue enfolding everybody that I disagree with, everybody that challenges me, everybody that I feel a threat from, whatever the case may be, that my spiritual work, my spiritual transformation demands that I enfold them into the oneness as well. Of course, Miracles has some statement somewhere, I can't remember exactly where it is in there, but basically the idea is that heaven is incomplete until everyone is there. Everyone, right? Yeah, everyone. Right? Because you're not going to have peace if you're trying to exclude someone from it. So no one's actually excluded from heaven, but if you don't see heaven, like if I don't see heaven as an outcome, as a possibility, then that's when we're truly in hell, so to speak, at that point in time, because I'm not seeing the possibility of heaven. I'm not being cast out of heaven. I don't even see it as a destination. Mm-hmm. That's in that denial. Y'all see the movie What Dreams May Come? Yeah. With Robin. That was basically the idea when he literally went through hell to try and rescue his wife. who had committed suicide. She wasn't being punished by her suicide. She was a victim in hell because she did not see the possibility of heaven in her despondency that led her to her. It wasn't that she's being cast out, she couldn't see it. So he literally goes through hell to save her. If you've never seen the movie, it's just wonderful. It's a beautiful, beautiful film. It's wonderful. But I always think about that, like her denial is what led to her despondency, what led to her depression, what led to her suicide, was that she ultimately had no hope. She couldn't see the possibility of the light. Not that the light was not present, not that she wasn't welcome in heaven, so to speak, but she couldn't. If you don't see it, if you don't have a hope of it, then you can't find the destination, right? So when we say all people are children of God, we are all created in the image and likeness of God, well, then how do we explain when bad things go wrong, when some people do bad things? It's because they're operating in opposition to their true nature, whether they see it or not. And many people don't see it because of their circumstances, whatever the case may be, and they feel hopeless. They don't see and connect with that divine nature. But if I'm committed to do my work, right, and then I know that there's an alternate reality, then it becomes incumbent upon me, if it's given to me, to be in communication with that person, to share that, like I was doing with my friend. Try to shake him up, get him out of his rut, to remind him, oh, you're a child of God, and God's not conspiring against you to frustrate your efforts. All of these challenges that you're receiving is because of your reliance upon external circumstances to change your circumstances. Your external circumstances will change when you take responsibility for your inner dimensions, right? So when I say all children are created equal in the image and likeness of God, all are inherently divine, I have to practice that. I have to practice that so that when something comes to me where I'm tempted to say, yeah, everybody except that guy, right? No, everybody. And if I don't have that underlying commitment, like Chad says, if you're not wholeheartedly committed to live these principles, then you're going to have limited outcomes. You're going to have limited experiences. And now we get up to the very top, that first principle. There's only one power, one presence active in the universe in our lives, God the good. There is no opposing power. There is no inherent, incarnate evil vying with God for the outcome of the universe. There's only human beings practicing from our limited perspectives that we're not affirming in our own experience that there's this one power, and our work is to align with that one power and presence, right? We can flail, we can do whatever we want. We can come and go in this lifetime. We can do our best to do damage in this lifetime. But ultimately, when we're gone, the power and the presence still remains. It's still ongoing. It's impervious. It didn't change. My efforts to rail against it or to destroy it or whatever have no power, because the only reality is that one power, one presence, that capital R reality. So if I'm committed first, like we said in unity principle number 5, I'm committed to live that truth, right? I'm committed to live that truth, that there's only one power, one presence active in the universe and in my life. And that's a good power, that there's no opposing bad power. How do you explain bad things, Rick? Well, we're all limited human beings. What is someone identifying with? Are they identifying with their humanity first, maybe even exclusively? Or are they identifying with their divinity first? Are they identifying, and like unity principle number 4, we're practicing meditation, affirmative prayer and everything to increase our awareness of our connection with the divine. If I'm not practicing that, if I'm not doing something to cultivate that awareness and stay in contact with it, then I won't see it. And I'll be just like Robin Williams' wife in What Dreams May Come, wailing and weeping and gnashing of teeth in hell, because I don't see the possibility of heaven. I don't see the possibility of love. I don't see the possibility of good. I'm only affirming the negative, and guess what? Whatever you affirm, that's what you get more of. That's a third principle, right? We're creating this experience, co-creating this experience of the thoughts and the feelings that we allow to dominate in our consciousness. And we are at choice. In fact, I would argue that that's probably the only place that we actually do have any executive control, so to speak, over our lives is right here in the activity of our thinking. I am in charge of what I'm allowing to think, not necessarily what I consume, not necessarily what I encounter in the world. Stuff happens in the world. It's like, oh, that's tragic. That's sad. Makes me sad. But once I become aware of it, what happens and how I parse it out and the conclusions I come to, the words I speak in response or reaction to it, those are my responsibility. And if I'm not committed to these principles that I say I believe, then I'm going to have limited experience. And the simple gauge, folks, y'all have heard me say this before, and I'll say it again because it's the prevailing truth. If I am not at peace for any reason, I have chosen fear. I have chosen wrongly. I have chosen in error. I am not seeing correctly. Of Course in Miracles says about miracles that miracles are naturally occurring. They're everywhere present. Like if I'm not seeing the miracles, that's not evidence the miracles are not present. It's evidence that I'm not seeing correctly. And that when I correct my vision, I see miracles everywhere. So Of Course in Miracles says that the only true miracle is a changed mind. Because the miracles are naturally occurring. This is a miracle. The technology that we're using to communicate with people who are not physically present, the construction of this building, beautiful surroundings that we're in, the day, our lives, our life experience, all of it is a miracle. And far be it from me to determine, what someone else's experience, what they necessarily need in their experience to facilitate their own transformation. All we can do is hold them in love. That's what becomes incumbent upon us. So I feel certain that I didn't do as good a job at explaining this as Shad Groberlin. So once again, I really do encourage y'all to go look that up on YouTube and watch it. It's what was interesting to me in watching him was, somebody up at Unity Worldwide is at the helm. Because for a while I was doubtful about that. Unity's been in disarray. We've all been in disarray. COVID and all the other kinds of things that have happened. And when I saw him, it re-energized me, not only about the principles, because it gave me a fresh look at how to look at them. It was like all of a sudden, after teaching the principles for years and years and years, like, here's a new way in, right? But more so than that, just seeing him embody the Unity, speak about it, it's energizing. It's life affirming. So I really do encourage look at it. Once again, that Shad, S-H-A-D, Groveland, and just type in Unity Church of the Hills. And I think the title of the talk is something like, Unity then, now, and in the future, or something to that effect. And it is a 40-minute presentation, but it is completely engaging. He's funny. He's engaging with the audience, and his content is really, really strong. So I do encourage y'all to follow through on that. And with that, do we go into meditation and just she lead us into music with meditation? Yeah. Leanne's going to come back up and lead us into meditation with music.
I will surrender to my greatest, highest good. I will release any fear that blocks my way. For every step I take is taken in pure faith. And I am stronger every moment, every day. And I am grateful every moment, every day. I will surrender to my greatest, highest good.
So let's take that last lyric line. We're going to surrender right now in this present moment. Surrender to our highest good. As we prepare ourselves for a little time, a moment or two in this contemplative silence, we do so in the knowledge and the awareness that we are practicing Unity's fourth principle when we take this time. That we go into the silence to practice increasing our awareness of our connection with the one power, the one presence that activates all life in the universe. And all life that is created by this power and presence is inherently divine. You are divine. I am divine. Everyone without exclusion is divine in their potential, divine at the blueprint of their soul. Our work is to practice that awareness, to practice increasing our awareness of that connection with the divine, and by extension, our connection with every living thing. Our work is to practice this so that our lives can be transformed. We have all the power, the creative faculties that we need to facilitate that transformation. Everything we need, everything we desire is within our own being. And so as we go into the silence, we bring that knowledge, we bring that truth in with us, and we practice to increase our connection, to increase our awareness of that connection to the divine, to the divinity within me, to the power that expresses through me. And we practice this right here, right now, in the silence. As we begin to gently draw our attention back into our surroundings, we say thank you to nature around us, surrounding us, for cooperating with us this morning to allow us that time in the silence. We thank the pesky flies for staying away for just a few moments so that we could have an uninterrupted connection with that awareness of the connection to the divine. And we allow this experience to inform our own thinking, our own feeling nature in this moment. And as we move out into the external world after we break here, we carry that connection, we carry that awareness of the divine with us into all of our interactions throughout the day. And when we're tempted to fall away from this, we can just take a moment. Oh, choose again. Go back into the silence. Wherever you are, God is, and all is well, despite appearances to the contrary. You are a divine being, a powerful child of God, intended to co-create an experience of love and power, unity and peace. And the one power and the one presence that activates all life in the universe goes with you to achieve that mission, is with you at all times. There is not any circumstance, not any challenge, not any experience where God is not present with you. And if God is present with you, so is the power of love. So is the power of reason. So is the power of forgiveness, the capacity for joy, empathy, compassion, and ultimately peace and bliss are yours wherever you are, whatever you're going through. We all have equal access to God's love. And for that truth, we are ever so grateful. And so we say, thank you, thank you, thank you, living, loving Spirit. We pray in the name and the nature of the indwelling Christ presence, and so it is, and so we allow it to be. Amen.
Amen.
Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. The light of God surrounds us, the love of God enfolds us, the power of God protects us, and the presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well.